Hello and welcome to Home Smart Energy's Solis Cloud app walkthrough and tutorial. The purpose of this tutorial is to help you understand how best to use the app, what you can use it for, what kind of information you can get from it, and maybe some limitations as well, because like many things in life, it's not perfect. It's really good, but it isn't quite perfect. The first thing to talk about is your login details. These should have been provided to you on installation. If you haven't got them, then do reach out and we'll get them to you quickly. You can get the app yourself, just be sure to make sure you get the one with this logo. Okay, fabulous. So this is the first page that you're probably going to see when you log into the app. This is your device overview. This page is not very useful. It's supposed to provide an idea of how much you're generating, like in the top left, it's your production. The top right is whether you're purchasing or selling energy to or from the grid. The bottom right is your domestic consumption, and the bottom left is activity with the battery if you have one. And it's not particularly useful because it looks like it's a live feed, but it actually only updates once every 5 minutes. And the data that it updates with is not always accurate. And it's not always taken in perfect sync either. So the thing to remember with this is that although it might look like a live feed and that all the numbers should add up, they might not. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a problem. It's just an artifact of the way that this monitoring system works. So it's useful really for telling whether or not your system is online. Now, these two graphs below are a lot more useful. So the top one describes your generation. That's all your generation characteristics. The yellow line that arches over the top is showing you what you're producing in a day, right? So that's your generation power at any given moment. The green shaded area underneath is all of that power that's been sent to a battery. Again, you won't see this if you don't have a battery installed. The orange line is all of the power that your house is using natively or domestically. So that's, kettles or microwaves or fridges or whatever. And then the blue line is all the power that you're selling to the grid, or the blue shaded area is all the power that you're selling to the grid. So that will be, that's only really going to come into effect once your batteries are full. The bottom chart shows your consumption there. So your consumption is indicated by the green line. And if you look on the very bottom left, maybe you can see it there, that is where you've got that little purple shading. That's where the battery's been discharging to meet your consumption. And you can see that in this example, the battery ran out at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and then it switches over to the red shaded area. And the red shaded area is actually where you're purchasing power from the grid. And then as you can imagine, if it goes to orange, that's where you are self-producing. So that's where you're using, your consumption is being met by the power that you're generating off your solar panels. I don't know if there's too much more to say here. Is there anything that I've forgotten? No, I think that's all. It's quite self-explanatory. Again, I suppose one more thing that would be important to mention is that these figures and these overhead figures may not match exactly what you get with your smart meter. You have to remember this is reported data taken once every 5 minutes, so it's rounded when it's taken, and it's rounded again when they do, when this platform does calculations. So there are significant errors there. So now to switch to the device view, like we just did up there, you can go back, you go overview and device. And if you scroll down a little bit, this is where you get access to all of the information that your inverter is able to record. So you go to the graph section, you'll hit parameters, and then you have all of these options. So like I say, this is all of the information available, and you can select a few different things to give you a good idea of what's going on. So like I'm showing on the screen here, the best one is obviously total power to show generation. Total grid active power is very useful because it shows you whether or not you're buying or selling power to or from the grid and how much. Battery power is fairly self-explanatory. It tells you what the battery power is, whether it's charging or discharging. And as well, we like to see battery SOC, which is battery state of charge. It tells us how much charge is in the battery, and total consumption power. I did that backwards, but yes, total consumption power is obviously how much load you're putting on your house in total. So if you hit the expand button, then we get a nice big view, and we can talk about the story that this information tells us, which is even more detailed than before. So if we work our way over from the left, that's midnight. So what you can see there is the light blue line above the kind of the center zero is the total consumption, and the black line underneath it is the total grid active power. So when total grid active power is negative, that means you're buying power from the grid, and when it's positive, it means you're selling. So through the early hours of the morning, you can see that the battery is discharging very, very slowly at about a rate of 60 odd watts through the entire night. And the total consumption, the top blue line, is mirrored pretty much exactly by the total grid active power. Again, there is a minor discrepancy there in the figures reported. It's, like I say, this is what I'm talking about. Like, it's not a perfect system, right? Because I promised that the battery is not discharging very much here at all. It is just an artifact of the reporting. And then at about sort of like 9, maybe 10 o'clock in the morning, you can see that the sun comes up and the total power increases, which is this light blue line here. So I don't know why this color scheme was chosen. I think it's somewhat random. Hopefully you can see it okay. But you can see that through the early hours of the morning, like about 10 o'clock in the morning, or 9 to 10 o'clock in the morning when the sun comes up, the battery power ramps up, and the battery SOC also ramps up. So we go from the minimum depth of discharge, which is about 16-17%, all the way up to 100% over the course of the morning, which is really nice because the consumption is quite low. So all of the excess power goes into the battery, which fills up nicely. And then once it's full, you can see that that blue line that shows, the black line that shows grid active power, total grid active power. We see that come into the positive as well, where it can. And obviously that's going to be where your battery is now full, your domestic demand is being met, so all the excess is being sold to the grid. Like I say, you'll be compensated for that if you set up an SEG, which we are able to advise you on, if you desire. And what else? Yeah, you can see through the evening there, so when the sun sets, so we get that lovely arc when the sun starts setting, the total consumption is out sort of more than the generation. The battery is going to start to discharge, so you can actually see the battery power start to ramp up a little bit there as well. You can see where in the morning the purple line was positive, well in the evening it's negative because it's not charging, it's now discharging. So you can see the blue line is now being mirrored by the purple line, which shows that the battery is powering up to meet that domestic demand. And there's no grid activity, which is lovely. The battery is draining, and then at about midnight it's 40% charged, which is very good. That's what we would like to see. So if we go to the following day, we can see midnight we start at about 40%. So we have all of those hours during the middle of the night. So from midnight to about 7 o'clock in the morning, the battery is discharging. There's no grid activity. And then first thing in the morning, it looks like between about sort of 6 o'clock and maybe 10 o'clock, we're buying a little bit of power from the grid. Maybe 11 o'clock, we're buying a little bit of power from the grid. And then through the rest of the day, it's the same story as before. The sun comes up, the batteries charge, and then we start selling power to the grid. So that's everything. Thank you very much for watching. Postscript. This video pairs really, really well with the manual that we've also written that can be found in the description below. Enjoy!